The knock on the door was loud, sharp, and impatient, cutting through the quiet house like a blade. Daniel Hayes stiffened at the kitchen table, his coffee untouched, his eyes fixed on the door. He already knew who it was. More importantly, he knew who had sent them. He stood slowly, every step heavy, as if the house itself was holding its breath. When he opened the door, 2 police officers stood on the porch, calm and professional. Their presence wasn't violent or rushed, but it was enough to make Daniel's chest tighten. Across the street, parked just far enough away to feel safe, sat a familiar car. Inside, it was his sister Marissa. She didn't look worried. She looked prepared. "Good afternoon, sir," one officer said. "We're here for a wellness check. Are you Daniel Hayes?" "Yes," Daniel answered. His voice was steady, though. His hands weren't. "My sister called you." The officer nodded carefully. "She expressed concern about your mental state." Daniel almost laughed, but the sound died in his throat. Unstable. That was the word Marissa liked. It sounded caring while doing real damage. He stepped back and opened the door wider. "Please," he said. "Come in, officer." As they entered, Daniel felt the weight of the past month press down on him. None of this had started suddenly. It had grown slowly, hidden under smiles and soft words. After their father died, grief had wrapped the family tight. Daniel had leaned on Marissa, trusting her to help manage things while he struggled to breathe through the loss. She had stepped up eagerly at first. It felt like kindness. She handled paperwork. She spoke to lawyers. She told Daniel not to worry, that she would take care of everything. He believed her. He wanted to believe her. She was his older sister. She had always been the strong one, but small things began to feel wrong. Bills Daniel didn't recognize. Counts he could no longer access. Papers that disappeared when he asked about them, when he questioned her. Marissa smiled and spoke slowly, like he was a child. "You're overwhelmed," she'd said. "Grief does that." Then she began telling others the same thing. Daniel noticed the shift in how people looked at him. Friends asked if he was okay in voices that carried doubt. An aunt suggested therapy without being asked. A cousin stopped, returning his calls. Every conversation left him feeling smaller, less sure of himself. Marissa was building a story, and Daniel was the problem in it. The officers stood in the living room now, observing the neat space, the framed family photos. The calm order didn't look like the home of an unstable man. Daniel could tell they were already unsure. "I'm not dangerous," Daniel said quietly. "I've never been. We're just here to check on you." One officer replied, "Do you have anything you'd like to tell us?" Daniel looked at the hallway leading to the study. His heart beat faster. This was the moment he had prepared for, even though he never wanted it to come to this. "Yes," he said. "But first, you should know why she called." The officers listened as Daniel spoke, his words careful and controlled. He didn't accuse. He didn't raise his voice. He explained how his sister had taken control after their father's death. How she claimed authority over finances. How she told people he wasn't well. "She says I forget things." Daniel said that I imagine problems, that I'm confused. The officers exchanged glances. "That's serious," one said. "Do you have proof?" Daniel nodded. Weeks earlier, that proof had come by accident. One sleepless night, unable to quiet his thoughts, Daniel wandered into his father's old study. It still smelled like old books and wood polish. On the shelf, he found the security system manual his father had once proudly shown him. Curious. Daniel accessed the archived footage. What he saw changed everything. The videos showed Marissa late at night, alone in the house, sorting documents, signing papers that weren't hers to sign, speaking on the phone in a voice full of false concern, practicing phrases, adjusting her tone. Rehearsing, Daniel watched her say the word unstable more than once. Each clip felt like a punch to the chest. The betrayal wasn't emotional alone. It was planned, thought out, executed with patience. That night, Daniel didn't cry. He didn't scream. He sat in silence, realizing his sister wasn't trying to help him. She was trying to replace him. Now, standing before the officers, Daniel walked to the television. His movements were calm, but his pulse raced. He picked up the remote and turned back to them. "I don't want trouble," he said. "I just want the truth." Outside, Marissa checked her phone, confident. She believed she had already won. She had always believed that dot inside the screen flickered to life. Before pressing play, Daniel paused. This was the line. Once crossed, nothing could return to how it was. Exposing her would protect him, but it would also end what little family remained. He thought of the nights he doubted himself. The shame, the quiet fear that maybe she was right. That fear hardened into resolve. "Please," Daniel said softly, "watch this footage." And as the video began, the house filled not with chaos, but with truth. Daniel sat in the living room as the officers followed him, their presence calm but deliberate. Every step he took reminded him of the betrayal that had quietly unfolded over the past month. It had been slow, subtle, almost invisible, but now it was undeniable. He had trusted Marissa completely, and she had used that trust like a weapon, building a narrative where he seemed unstable, weak, and incapable. Each carefully orchestrated lie, each whispered suggestion to relatives, each small act of manipulation now screamed in his mind. It wasn't just about money or control, it was about dignity, about taking away the identity he had always relied on. He remembered the moment he discovered the security footage. It was late at night, the house silent except for the hum of electronics. His fingers trembled as he scrolled through the recordings. Marissa moved through the study like a shadow of precision, her hands rifling through documents, her expression calm, almost satisfied. She had practiced the conversations, perfected her tone for the phone calls she intended to make, all to paint him as unstable. He watched her over and over and felt a burning anger rise, slow and steady. The footage was proof of her manipulation, her deceit, and he held it in his mind like a weapon, waiting for the right moment. Anger alone wasn't enough. Daniel's thoughts swirled with questions. Should he confront her directly? Should he show the footage to friends, relatives, anyone who might believe him? He weighed each possibility carefully. He did not want a public scene. He did not want humiliation to become his method of revenge. He wanted justice, or at least something close to it. He wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done, not because he relished her discomfort, but because it was the only way he could reclaim what had been stolen. As he moved through the house toward the living room, Daniel rehearsed his words silently. The officer's eyes followed him, cautious, measuring his tone and demeanor. They had come to check on him, to ensure his well-being, yet what they would soon see would shift their understanding completely. Daniel felt the tension coil in his chest. The desire for revenge had a strange clarity. It sharpened his senses and made his mind focus on the smallest details. Every gesture, every phrase had meaning. There was no room for error. He thought about Marissa in the car across the street. She believed she had orchestrated everything perfectly. In her mind, she was justified. He had been weak, distracted, incapable of managing their father's estate. And she had stepped in to protect the family. That belief made her dangerous. People who believe in their own righteousness rarely see the harm they cause. Daniel knew that, and it fueled his determination. He didn't want to hurt her out of spite. He wanted to expose the truth, and in doing so, reclaim the control she had stolen. In the living room, Daniel gestured toward the television. The remote felt heavy in his hand, loaded with possibility. He could have destroyed the footage, ignored it. Let the story die silently, but that would mean surrendering to her manipulation. Every lie she told, every manipulation she enacted, would go unchallenged. That thought ignited a deep, almost desperate resolve. He could feel the years of trust, love, and sibling loyalty that she had used against him, twisting into something else, a careful, measured desire to set things right. Daniel hesitated just for a moment, weighing the morality of what he was about. To do revenge, he realized, wasn't simple. It wasn't about anger alone. It was about the consequences, about understanding that each action would ripple outward. If he exposed her recklessly, he might break family ties completely. He might fuel resentment that lasted decades. But if he didn't act, he would remain a victim, powerless. Haunted by the knowledge that she had successfully manipulated everyone around him. That sense of helplessness was unbearable. He pressed play. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the television. Marissa appeared on the screen, her movements deliberate, her hands moving over documents with care. Daniel watched the officer's expressions shift as the story unfolded. Her rehearsed phone calls, the careful forging of signatures, the practiced tone of concern, which was all there, clear and undeniable. Daniel felt a mix of satisfaction and unease. Satisfaction because the truth was visible, undeniable. Unease because revenge rarely felt like a victory. It was always tinged with a strange, hollow echo of grief and loss. As the video continued, Daniel imagined the confrontation that would follow. He saw Marissa's face when the footage was revealed. He imagined her justifications, her excuses. The moments she would pause, realize, and recognize her miscalculations. But he also imagined her fury, the denial, the twisted reasoning that people often cling to when caught in their own lies. This duality fascinated and terrified him. Revenge wasn't just about truth, it was about forcing someone to see reality in the way you did, and sometimes reality hurt more than anger could. The officers leaned forward, their focus intense. They asked questions, paused the footage, pointed out moments of forgery, of rehearsed lines. Daniel answered calmly, succinctly, careful not to let emotion overpower clarity. He wanted them to see the pattern, the intent, the methodical nature of Marissa's actions. He wanted her plans exposed without needing to speak a single accusatory word directly at her. The footage did it all for him, throughout it all. Daniel felt a strange mixture of emotions: betrayal, rage, sorrow, and a sharp, almost surgical focus on the consequences. He realized that revenge was not an instant gratification. It was a careful orchestration, a mental exercise in patience, strategy, and restraint. He wanted Marissa to understand, in the clearest terms possible, what she had done. Not to humiliate her for the sake of cruelty, but to make the world see the truth. Even as he watched the footage, Daniel struggled internally. He questioned himself constantly. Was he justified? Was he becoming someone he didn't want to be? Did the desire for revenge make him better or worse than the person who betrayed him? These questions churned in his mind, but he did not let them paralyze him. Instead, he let them guide him, ensuring that every word, every action, every frame of footage served a purpose. By the time the video ended, Daniel had reached a clarity he hadn't felt in weeks. The officers had seen enough to understand the manipulation. They now had evidence, context, and perspective that shifted the entire situation. Daniel felt the tension in his chest loosen slightly, but he also knew the hardest part was still ahead, confronting Marissa, facing the consequences. And deciding how far he would let this revenge go, he realized revenge wasn't about immediate action. It was about preparation, timing, and understanding the moral weight of each choice. The planning itself was a form of control, a way to reclaim autonomy that had been stolen. Daniel felt his desire for justice sharpen like a blade. Precise, measured, ready for the moment it would be needed. The conflict inside him between fury and morality, between desire and reason, dominated every thought. He understood that this desire for revenge could consume him if he let it. But if handled with care, it could serve as a tool to reclaim what was his, not just materially, but emotionally. Every carefully considered step, every observation, every calculation mattered. He breathed deeply, sensing the intensity of the moment. The officers were still processing, the room filled with quiet anticipation. And Daniel knew that in a few moments, everything would shift. The footage had done its work, but the real decision, the true climax of his inner conflict, was still ahead. The desire for revenge had been carefully nurtured, and now it would face its ultimate test: to act or to wait, to strike or to step back, to satisfy anger or to claim dignity. As the officers discussed what they had seen, Daniel allowed himself a brief, quiet acknowledgement of how far he had come. The betrayal had been deep, methodical, and painful, but he had transformed that pain into clarity. His mind was focused, precise, and ready. The desire for revenge no longer burned chaotically. It moved with purpose, guided by logic and truth. He knew the confrontation would come, and when it did, he would face it fully, with the weight of every decision pressing down on him, and the clear understanding of what was at stake. Daniel stood in the living room, the officers still present, the silence pressing down like a living thing. The television screen flickered faintly, reflecting shadows across his face, but the footage had already done its work. Marissa's carefully constructed lies, her manipulations, her rehearsed phone calls, all of it lay bare for anyone to see. Daniel's hands tightened around the remote, not out of fear, but from the weight of the moment. Every heartbeat reminded him that this was the turning point. Everything that had led to this moment, the betrayal, the preparation. The months of quiet observation culminated here. He could feel the tension coil and unwind in his chest. Outside, Maurice's car remained parked across the street. She believed herself untouchable, confident that her actions had gone unnoticed, that her narrative had been set in stone. Daniel imagined her smug expression, the calm certainty in her voice, the quiet satisfaction of having everyone convinced that he was unstable. But she had miscalculated. He had seen everything. He had watched her every move, her intentions laid bare by the father's forgotten security cameras. The officers glanced between Daniel and the screen, noting his calm demeanor despite the intensity of the situation. They were trained to observe body language, tone, and subtle hints. But they hadn't anticipated the calculated focus Daniel displayed. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't desperate. He was deliberate, precise, a man balancing the edge between justice and personal vengeance. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling this strange cocktail of relief, anger, and anticipation swirling inside him. Revenge had been growing inside him for weeks, but this was not a blind, impulsive desire. This was controlled, tempered, and guided by an understanding of the consequences. Every step mattered, every word carried weight, every action shaped the outcome. He pressed play again on a key segment of the footage. Marissa appeared on the screen, moving through the study with careful attention. Signing papers she shouldn't, speaking into the phone with a tone of rehearsed concern. Daniel felt a tightening in his chest, not from rage, but from recognition of her calculated betrayal. The officers leaned in, their expressions shifting as they observed the depth of her actions. Daniel could see the moment they understood. This was not a misstep, not a lapse in judgment. It was deliberate, methodical, and meant to manipulate him, to erase his credibility, to steal what was his. He imagined Marissa seeing this evidence herself. He imagined the shock, the disbelief, the desperation to rewrite her own story. He imagined the excuses she would form, the rationalizations she would cling to, and the denial she would try to assert. And yet Daniel felt no desire to escalate. Beyond the truth, he did not need theatrics. He did not need humiliation. The footage spoke for itself, and that was enough. The officers paused the video, exchanging quiet words, their tone shifting to professional concern. Daniel answered their questions clearly, calmly, detailing how he discovered the recordings, how Marissa's manipulations had unfolded, and how the calls had been rehearsed. He avoided exaggeration, avoided emotion. The truth needed no embellishment. Only careful presentation. As the officers discussed next steps, Daniel felt the moment approaching. The real confrontation would come soon. He knew that when Marissa entered the house, when she faced the reality of her own actions, the balance would shift. That was the point he had been waiting for. Not a confrontation fueled by anger, but a reckoning powered by truth. The officers moved toward the door to call Marissa in. Daniel could see her through the window, still in her car, still confident. That confidence had to be broken, but not by lies or theatrics. It had to be dismantled by clarity, by undeniable evidence, by the inevitability of consequences. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. The desire for revenge was intense, almost electric, but he kept it under control. He did not want rage to dictate the moment. He wanted strategy, precision, and clarity. Marissa entered the house cautiously, her expression polite, curious, almost suspicious. Daniel watched her, noting the micro-expressions that revealed her internal calculations. She thought she had power. She believed she could talk her way out of this, that her charm, her practiced concern, could protect her. She had never anticipated that Daniel would turn her own tactics against her. He led her into the living room, his movements steady, deliberate. The officers followed, silent observers. Daniel gestured toward the television and the paused footage. Marissa's eyes widened slightly as recognition flickered across her face. She tried to speak, but the words faltered. Daniel allowed the silence to linger, heavy and uncomfortable. This was the first real crack in her armor. The footage played again. This time in full, showing every calculated act of manipulation, every forged document, every rehearsed phrase. Marissa's initial shock transformed into denial, then into attempts to justify her actions. Her voice shook slightly, the controlled tone she had practiced failing her. Daniel listened quietly, observing, measuring, feeling the weight of truth pressing down. She had created her own downfall without realizing it. As the video ended, Daniel felt the finality of the moment. He had considered taking further action, using public exposure, legal pressure, or personal confrontation as tools of revenge. But, watching Marissa, hearing her justifications crumble, he realized that the true power lay in the undeniable truth. She had manipulated and betrayed. And now she had no choice but to face it. The officers stepped forward, ready to act as required. Daniel remained still, his decision already made. He could have escalated, punished, or humiliated, but he chose restraint. He understood now that revenge was not about destruction. It was about reclamation, exposing her actions through truth, calmly, methodically. Allowed him to regain control without becoming the person he despised. Marissa's face fell as the reality of her actions became undeniable. She realized that manipulation could not undo the evidence, that rehearsed concern could not erase her calculated deceit. Daniel felt a mix of satisfaction and something more complex sadness, a recognition of how far trust could be twisted, how easily love and loyalty could be exploited. The officer spoke softly, outlining the next steps, the consequences, the legal implications. Daniel listened, absorbing every word, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The confrontation he had anticipated for weeks had occurred, but it was not fueled by rage or malice. It was fueled by truth. And in that truth, he found clarity. As Marissa was escorted away for questioning, Daniel remained in the living room, silent. The desire for revenge had reached its peak, and he had allowed it to serve justice rather than destruction. He realized that in the moment of climax, when the choice could have led to anger-driven chaos, he had chosen strategy, patience, moral strength. He understood something essential. Revenge, when left unchecked, can consume. But when guided by clarity, evidence, and careful consideration, it can restore balance without creating further harm. Daniel felt a quiet, steady sense of accomplishment. Not satisfaction, but control, justice, and understanding for the first time in weeks. The room felt calm. The officers finished their work, documenting the events, ensuring that the truth would be recognized. Daniel watched Marissa leave, not with pleasure at her downfall, but with recognition of the consequences of her choices. In that moment, Daniel realized that revenge was never about joy, it was about reclaiming agency. Yes. He had been wronged, betrayed, manipulated, and humiliated. But he had responded with precision, integrity, and calm. The climax of his struggle was not destruction. It was the assertion of truth, the careful presentation of evidence, and the moral choice to act thoughtfully rather than impulsively. The room grew quiet again. Daniel allowed himself to breathe deeply, sensing the shift in power and understanding. In balance. Its climax had passed, and with it, the raw intensity of desire for revenge had softened into something more profound. Control, clarity, and the knowledge that he had acted wisely. Revenge had been close. It had been within reach. But true resolution lay not in rage, but in measured truth. Daniel had faced the moment, made the decision, and in doing so, reclaimed what had been stolen. Not just possessions, not just trust, but dignity, clarity, and moral authority. As the sunlight shifted across the room, Daniel understood the lesson deeply. Revenge could satisfy the surface desire for retaliation, but only truth, patience, and moral choice could restore balance without leaving deeper wounds. The climax was over, and the outcome was clear. Justice had been served carefully, deliberately, and without unnecessary cruelty. Daniel felt the weight in his chest ease, the tension leave his shoulders. The confrontation had been completed. The choice had been made. The desire for revenge had been satisfied, not by rage, but by control, clarity, and truth. And in that, he found something far more lasting than satisfaction. A steady, unwavering sense of agency and the knowledge that he had faced the ultimate to stand, had acted wisely.